Today, we're talking about the swine flu pandemic and the steps you must take to be prepared. Joining me is H1N1. How are you?
Hi, nice to meet you.
Now, you're a mom.
Yes, I am.
Are you worried about swine flu?
I'm very worried about it, actually, because they're saying that up to 50% of the population could be, you know, infected with this. And I have 3 girls, 12, 10, and 5.
You're going to vaccinate them?
Yeah.
Did you see her face? Is she believable? Really not. They would never have allowed her on the stage if she hadn't held a position and stated that she would say yes.
Now remember, everybody in the audience is getting one of these flu shots, so...
Everyone in the audience getting the flu shot? I wonder whether they've done medical histories on everyone in the audience and found out the contraindications to the vaccinations. Maybe about 15–20% of the audience have the vaccine injury called eczema, which contraindicates further exposure to these types of vaccinations. Do you think they really screen these patients?
We all get it.
Notice the cutaway. This was a cut. It was a cut clip where they showed the whole audience clapping and smiling. You know, any audience that would be told that the whole audience is going to get vaccinated, a lot of people would go, ow. A lot of people would go, not me. This is a scam.
I'm just going first.
Swine flu was on the doorstep. This deadly infection has already wreaked havoc around the world. And alarmingly, the World Health Organization has now upgraded it to a global pandemic.
You need to know that the World Health Organization is an institution that was established by the Rockefeller family, along with a complete control, monopolization over American medicine back in the early 1920s. The whole disease surveillance outpost the World Health Organization runs, well, another Rockefeller entity. In essence, you have a propaganda campaign that's advancing a global genocide.
Hardest hit, the United States, where a staggering 1 million Americans have already been infected.
Listen to this fear. Over 1 million people already infected. Well, gee whiz, a normal flu will do far worse than that. A normal flu season kills about 36,000 people. Who are these people that die? Typically the elderly, the immune-compromised people who have been on drugs and pharmaceuticals being pushed by the same drug industrialists that are pushing the vaccinations. In this case, the reality is far more people should be frightened about your average flu, as experts have already said that H1N1 pandemic flu is less dangerous than your average flu.
It's a chilling reminder of swine flu's deadly predecessor, the Spanish flu pandemic of 1918, which started small in the spring and then came roaring back in the fall, ultimately killing 40 million people worldwide.
The Spanish flu of 1918 that killed all those millions of people was actually dug up in 1997 by Dr. David Sencer and other researchers for the Centers for Disease Control. If you study history, medical history that is, Dr. David Sencer played a major role in not just the digging up of the 1918 Spanish flu. He was instrumental in the 1976 investigation of Fort Dick's mysterious outbreak that, according to all of the evidence, was most likely a military experiment on New Jersey military personnel at Fort Dick's who had never touched a pig. There was no pigs at Fort Dick's. None of the soldiers that came down with this illness ever touched a pig on leave. And in essence, what you had is a standard military operation. Interesting that David Sencer was at the CDC at that time, and this was the exact time when they started to promote the 1976 swine flu vaccine program. Now, if that's not bad enough, follow Dr. David Sencer a little further, and you'll realize that they sent him right at this time, 1976, when the AIDS virus was outbreaking in New York City. They sent Dr. David Sencer, fresh from the swine flu vaccine campaign, into New York to oversee the manipulation of the media and the media's response to contaminated blood fears with HIV, the AIDS virus. It was Dr. Sencer who stalled and allowed for the AIDS virus contaminated blood at the New York Blood Center to be shipped all over the world to support the Rockefeller-directed American Red Cross and to shield that organization as well as other major drug companies such as the Bayer Corporation and today's company called Baxter that produces the swine flu vaccine. Well, likewise, they spread HIV/AIDS through heparin-contaminated blood factor and blood products. One more thing about Dr. David Sencer. This was the doctor that signed off on the Tuskegee syphilis study to have the Public Health Service actually not treat and simply observe black men who were infected with the deadly syphilis agent.
Eerily, experts now say a second wave of the swine flu is coming this fall. Their prediction? Horrifying. As many as 150 million people infected.
Horrifying? 150 million people infected with H1N1? Gee whiz. That's not the real problem. The real problem is H5N1, the avian flu that kills 2 out of 3 people that it infects. And it was spread by the Baxter Corporation once again, that is, the makers of the contaminated heparin blood factor products that contain the AIDS virus, and that this company actually spread H5N1 to 18 European laboratories in February of 2009. So the concern that H5N1, this major deadly virus that has the capacity to recombine with this benign or relatively benign H1N1 virus, that is what the major concern, the major risk is.
Up to 90,000 could die, all in the U.S. alone. It's the worst-case scenario the medical community is desperate to prevent.
If the medical community is so interested in preventing this illness, why don't they tell people about the simple things that they can do beyond hand washing and beyond mask wearing? How about vitamin C, vitamin D, good nutrition? Those are antivirals, very powerful those vitamins are. And how about the suppressed silver hydrosols, oxysilver for example, which was produced for NASA to be given to astronauts to keep astronauts healthy in space? Well, it's a simple mineral water. Doesn't cause any side effects. Why don't they give that to the public? But no, they've got to inject people, infect people, intoxicate people, and depopulate people. The fact is that's what vaccinations are about. When you inject people with foreign RNA and DNA from these viruses, and you add to that the chemical toxins, everything from water and oil, squalene, adjuvants, mercury, aluminum, formaldehyde, formalin, all toxic waste, well, what do you expect but people getting sick? And that's precisely what happens in 65 to 70% of the people who get flu shots get sick with the flu.
Now, before we go any further, let me tell you a little bit about how the swine flu got started. Now, I have this animation. I think it'll help you. If you look at exactly what happened, the virus came actually from a couple sources. It came from humans and from birds, and it met up in swine and pigs. And these virus molecules got together, and they began to share a blueprint.
Dr. Oz just proved that he's a complete simpleton. This simple explanation is not really at all what really happened. The fact is that 2 children initially, around the 15th of April 2009, living about 100 miles apart in Southern California, who had never seen each other, never sneezed on one another, broke down allegedly with this kind of flu, H1N1. At the same time in Mexico, the Mexican outbreak began allegedly with the same strain. The reality is that it was impossible, except for there being some sort of a refrigerator or a human transportation device, to have had those children who were never in touch with the Mexicans and the Mexicans never in touch with these children to come down with the same type of flu. The reality is also that there was a vaccination campaign, according to testimony that is currently playing on YouTube. Anecdotal as it may be, that is the most likely scenario. There was a nurse supposedly who testified that this was what happened. A vaccine-induced illness began to spread in Mexico. Subsequently, the media caught on. Thomas Glosser's Reuters news service broke the story that there was potentially H5N1, avian flu, mixed with H1N1 and the Spanish flu, all combining in Mexican pigs and humans now that were going to wreak havoc with the world. At the same time, little do most people realize The Centers for Disease Control and the Novavax Corporation were beginning to push their vaccinations, the new flu vaccines, like Johnny on the spot, that could handle H5N1 and H1N1. Well, of course, stocks began to soar. In fact, it was days before the first H1N1 flu was announced that the press releases had already begun to fly. Today, this corporation, Novavax, is run by one of the major companies that produce the H1N1 swine flu vaccine. It's called Novartis. And the other major vaccine corporation that's producing these swine flu vaccines, these pandemic H1N1 flu vaccines, is the Merck Pharmaceutical Company, with Thomas Glosser, the CEO of Reuters, on the board of directors of the Merck Pharmaceutical Company.